So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. This is live Q&A session on website redesigns. And my name is Nicholas Longton. So just in case you're not aware, Arcstone, that's the company I work for, and we have an events area with on-demand webinars and discussions too, and all kinds of things. Check that out if you'd like to. And if you do have to leave or miss any part of this, this will be available on that page later on demand, but you'll get it in an email too. The follow-up email has a lot of information in it. It will have this, all the tools, links to the tools I'm going to show you, links to a bunch of templates and things that you can use. So all of that will be included. In case you have no idea who Arcstone is, we're based in Minneapolis, and we're a full service digital agency, and we focus mostly on nonprofits and those sort of purpose-driven brands. Just to give you an idea of a couple of the types of clients, Natural Mentoring Resource Center, we redesigned their site. Children and Nature Network, another nonprofit, we redesigned their site. And I highly, if you check out any of the sites we've done, recently, the Children and Nature Network one is super cool. Check that site out. It's a very interesting design, very cool, very on brand, but still highly usable, very fast, very mobile friendly. I think it actually recently won an award. So check that out. It's very cool. And it's just a cool organization. Hunger Solutions, another nonprofit. So here's kind of the agenda for this Q&A session. I'm going to go through these 5 major areas, and please feel free at any time to chat in the chat. Feel free to answer the polls and to ask a question. Please ask the questions in the Q&A panel rather than the chat, just so I can see what an actual question is, right? And try, if you can, stick to the section we're in. If we're talking about, we're going to talk about preparing for a redesign, how to evaluate your site. So if you have questions about, things you might want to have on hand before you start your redesign, that's a good time to ask those questions. But feel free to ask questions anytime, and I will answer them. I'm going to try to make this really interactive. So we're going to go through preparing for your redesign, kind of how you evaluate your current site, what you may want to glean from that, your website platform and structure. What do you want to build your website on? What kind of CMS platform, and how do you really structure it? Content stuff and planning, and then kind of how you wireframe and layout stuff, and then some stuff about design and content. So those kind of the major areas of really a website redesign. So who am I? A little introduction. Like I said, I'm Nicholas Longton. I work for a company called Arcstone. My title is Senior Strategist. So, why would you want to ask me a question? Why should you listen to me? So I've actually been working in the web and building websites since the 90s. I really started doing sites in 1995 and really sort of full-time professionally in about 97. I have literally worked on hundreds of websites and dozens of different platforms. I was the first employee actually of Arcstone about 20 years ago. So I've done everything. I've set up hosting and managed servers and email and done programming in a dozen languages. I've done a lot of design, done Flash and video and photography and content work and mobile apps and ongoing marketing for sites, social media, and a lot more stuff. Basically anything having to do with your digital presence, you could probably ask me a question about it and I'll be able to help you. So that's kind of who I am, and just a fun little thing to show you. A walk down history lane. Here is a current client of mine, actually. And this client I first started working with in the 90s. This is a website, collegerecruiter.com. And here is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 versions of their site. So this is, top down, left to right, various iterations of their website that I've worked on going back to the 90s. And it's kind of cool to look at this, how much stuff has changed, right? And the large picture on the bottom is their current site. And we are actually kind of planning with them another website redesign right now for fairly soon. So it's kind of cool to look at this, go back. And so how I went and saw these really old versions, even going back to pre-2000s, is one of the tools. And I'll show you this tool. And I'm going to go through kind of a bunch of tools you can use, but it's a fun thing called the Wayback Machine. It's from something called the Internet Archive. So if any of you have a website right now that's quite old, that's been on the internet for a really long time, not the current version, but if your domain has been on the internet for a really long time and you want to take a peek at it, we can look at it. if you put it in the chat. But basically, Wayback Machine is what I'm talking about. And this is from the Internet Archive. So this is a free thing. And if you ever want to look at a website, what it looked like a really long time ago, you can punch this in here. So someone put in their website, macmh.org. Let's take a look at what that website looked like a long time ago. Okay, so here's the history of all of your websites. So what this service does is they go and they just capture websites, a picture, like a snapshot in time. And it's kind of fun. So let's go way, way back. So we have the 90s, 1999. And here's the calendar of when they took screenshots. February 8th, 1999. Let's take a look down memory lane. Look at that. All right. Definitely 90s website. It's pretty fun to do this, to look back at really old things. So try that if you want on your own, and check out some old sites. So if anyone else wants to put one in there, we could look at it. But we'll go on to more of the content I have for you. And of course, feel free to ask questions anytime. I'm going to switch the poll here quick too. So I have a lot of polls. So thank you for answering those. That's fun. It helps guide the discussion. So it looks like most of you have sites that are 4 to 5 years old, something like that. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some things that's handy to have before you embark down your website redesign project. So personas, and if you're unfamiliar with what a persona is sort of a fictional person you create in your mind, and you document that represents your audience, right? Who is your audience? So of course, if you're trying to make a website for everyone, it's not going to really function for anyone that well. So you want to really dial in your design, your content, everything, right, based around your audience. Branding and style documents that really define your style and your fonts and your official colors and your official logo and everything. So when you get to that design phase, you have that ready. And then a quick note about teams and roles. It's very helpful for websites if you have really on your end in your organization sort of a leader, like a one single decision maker, right? So what can stall a website redesign project really is when you have to get like 15 people to sign off on, what the design is going to look like, or what the page structure is going to be, or what content's going to be on this page. If you can really have someone in your organization put in charge of approving, making decisions, like moving the project forward, right? So I've seen that stall things. So I asked if you guys have personas and brand guides. It looks like about a third say you do. That's awesome. They're very helpful. And I'm going to actually give you a toolkit. I'm going to show you a toolkit we have, which you're going to be able to download for free. It's going to come in the follow-up email. And if you don't have things like a persona or a style guide or a brand voice guide, it actually has worksheets in it for you to start filling that out and kind of building it. So it looks like about a third of you say you don't have personas and a brand guide. So you could take advantage of that toolkit for sure. All right, so preparing for a redesign, I just mentioned this toolkit, and there'll be a couple pages I'll show you in there. And also, this is just the cover of it. So it's basically a marketing and kind of communications strategy toolkit. So it has things in it like the persona guide and a brand style voice guide, and like page worksheets for filling out to develop the content for a web page, right? All that kind of stuff. Some SEO guidance in there. So I'll show you a couple things from that, but that'll be freely available for you to download. So we're going to talk a bit, about your current site, right? And feel free, of course, ask questions anytime as things come up. So how do you evaluate your current site? How do you do that? I'm going to talk about a few things here. Of course, analytics and search review. You want to look at your Google Analytics, and you want to look at how you show up in search engines. I'm assuming everyone here wants their site found easily in search engines, right? You want to review the design. What about your current design works? What doesn't work? Are there problems with it? And reviewing your current site content, right? Because most of the time people are bringing over some content from their old site. They're not just, blowing it all away. So what do you want to look at for that? So that's kind of the things we're going to go through. And I'll show you a couple tools right now we're going to use, I'll just show you kind of my quick sort of toolbox of stuff for my browser here. So here's my browser that's set up, and I have a bunch of tools we're going to go through. Let me just get rid of that. So the first thing is I have a screen capture tool. I'm using the Chrome browser, which pretty much most people are, I think, now. I have a screen capture tool that called Go Full Page that captures an image of a full page screenshot, so it even scrolls to the bottom. It's kind of handy if you want to get an image of your whole web page to show it to someone or mark up or make notes on. This is the Google Tag Assistant. If you use Google Tag Manager a lot, and I highly recommend you all use it, it's really great for custom analytics and tracking button clicks and video plays and different things all in one place. And this basically, when you turn it on, it shows you the tags. It basically shows you what Google is doing in the background. Is Google Analytics installed? Is the remarketing tag for Google AdWords installed? All those different things. This is a resizing thing, window resizer. So if you want to see what does my web page look like at a specific resolution, you can punch that in and see that. Word counter. This lets you just highlight text on a page, gives you the count of words. It's really nice because when you get into things like SEO, if you want a web page to be found in search engines, you kind of have a certain minimum amount of content you have to have on the page. So that's handy. That's just my HubSpot plugin. This is a thing that converts pages to web pages to PDFs, so you can do that. This is a Crazy Egg plugin for tracking UX stuff, and I'm going to show you Crazy Egg a little bit. It's a tool we use. This is the Facebook Pixel Helper for the Facebook kind of analytics stuff. This is a color picker, so it lets you get an eyedropper and then click on a web page anywhere, and kind of see exactly what color that is. That's nice for designing and working on web pages. And so that's kind of those plugins. And then I have a whole toolkit of tools, and I'll show you some of these too. Different things like this tool extracts metadata and descriptions from URLs. If you want to kind of see the metadata in the page, like the page title, page description. Page speeds insights is for testing your performance, and especially mobile performance of your pages, and that's really important. The wave accessibility tool. So this is to test accessibility. The contrast checker, that's a color tool to help you test the contrast between colors so you can meet those minimum guidelines for accessibility. Color space is a color tool that you can punch in, let's say, like one of your brand colors, and it gives you a whole complementary palette. That's really nice if you want to make your new website have some new colors and things. Embed responsively is a tool for embedding content like slideshows and videos. Say you have a YouTube video or a Vimeo video or a slideshow, and you want to embed it and make it mobile friendly and responsive. That's a tool for that. Andy is the accessibility tool that the actual government makes available. Here's an online whiteboard and collaboration tool that's free. I don't use this a ton because I have a kind of an expensive paid tool I use, but this is a great tool for the planning stage for site maps and kind of getting the structure of your site down. And then I just showed you that Wayback Machine. So these are just some of the tools that are really handy for redesigns, and we'll use some of those as I demonstrate things, and we'll go through that. So reviewing your current site. And if you have any questions about analytics, what you want to pay attention to, or anything specific to your situation, of course, feel free to put in a question. I want to make this very interactive. So analytics, the major things you want to look at when you're planning for your redesign is you want to look at how is your current site used, right? So you want to look at things like your top pages, especially pay attention to the entry pages. Many times the main entry page of your website is the home page if someone's Googling you, but other times, it's going to be those other pages. So if you have several other pages people are entering in your website on, pay attention to what those are. You may want to, retain a lot of that content because it must be working for you if that's how people are finding you. You want to look at your events and goals too. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, in Google Analytics, there's an area for goals. And a lot of people, I look at their account, it's not even turned on. So definitely set up goals for your site. Things like, contact us, things like downloads, things like clicking on a donate button or donating or any events you want like that. You can video plays. If you have a video on your about page and you want to see how many people have clicked that and played it, you can track all that in Google Analytics, but it has to be set up in sort of a custom fashion. So if you can, make sure your current analytics account is tracking all those things you care about. The nice thing about that is then you have a baseline. And so when you redesign your site, you'll know, oh, okay, well, we redesigned the donation page and now we're getting more donations, right? So that was a step in the right direction. And pay attention to the user flow too. Like I said, how people enter, where people leave, how many pages are people looking at, how much time do they spend on the site? And you have to look at that and really kind of measure that stuff. And then your search engine visibility. So that would be, what keywords do you show up for? Are there important keywords that you want to show up for that you're not? That's a sign you'll need a lot more content in the new site, related to those keywords. And you can find that stuff through many tools. We use SEMrush mostly, but that is kind of an expensive paid tool. A free tool is Google Search Console. If you don't have that set up, definitely get Google Search Console set up. That is basically your sort of window into the Google world, right? When it relates to your website. How many of your website pages are actually in the Google index? What keywords are you showing up for? How many times per month are you showing up in search results? All of that data is in Google Search Console. So definitely, if you don't have that set up, check that out, get that set up. Thanks for the poll. I'm going to switch the poll again here. I have quite a few polls. So here's one about analytics, if you have this stuff set up. So beyond analytics, when you're looking at your current site, highly recommended if you can to also do a UX review, sort of the design, right? So that would be beyond kind of what analytics tracks. So Google Analytics, when you load a web page, it's tracking that page view. It's tracking where that user came from. Did they come from social? Did they find you organically? That kind of stuff. But if people are clicking on a button that leaves the site, or if they're interacting with a map, or say they're clicking on your logo, but your logo isn't actually linked to anything and they think it should bring them back to the home page, like UX reviews like that, how far people scroll down in a page, that stuff is generally not tracked in sort of Google Analytics or most tools. So this is a tool called Crazy Egg that we use. We always put that on a site before we redesign it to see if there are UX design issues, right? Do you have things that are buttons but don't look enough like buttons, so no one's clicking on? Or do you have an area of your site, a design element that isn't a button, but it kind of looks like it, so people are clicking on it? So, and how far are people scrolling? Do you have a really important call to action on the page, but people don't scroll far enough to see it, most people? So, and this separates mobile too. There's desktop views and mobile views. And so it gives you a really good idea of how the site's actually used, the UX, the design. So this is an important thing, I would say, to look at before you embark down the process of redesigning. You want to keep what's working and rework the things that are not working. So it looks like we've got in the polls, we have, it looks like only 17% of you said you're keeping on top of analytics and have goals and events set up. That's actually typically what I find is very few people have this all really dialed in and set up ahead of time. So a couple of people said, what is a custom event? So that would be the things I mentioned, like say you have a donate button and it leaves your website. By default, that's not tracked in Google Analytics because that's not a page load on your website. That's someone leaving. So with Google Tag Manager, you can set up a custom event, call it whatever you want, donation button click or whatever. And then you can use that tool, Tag Manager, to track that button, and Tag Manager will feed those clicks into analytics. So you can see not only when someone gets to a page, but when they click the button that leaves your site, you can see that too. So that's kind of what these custom events are. You want to take a look too at your site for, I would say, speed and accessibility, right? You want to make sure, and this is very helpful too for deciding, say your website's only a couple years old, like some of you said, do we need a full redesign? Do we want to do a partial redesign? Do we want to just add a new section, right? So when you're kind of deciding about how much effort you want to put into your redesign, look at your current site's speed and mobile performance and look at its current site's accessibility, right? And if say the current website speed is just really terrible and there's nothing you could do about it, then you're probably due for a full redesign, right? Or say you have a lot of accessibility problems. You've been using your brand color heavily in the design and it's very light. It's not dark enough. There's not enough contrast. Then also you could maybe swap out that color, or you may be due for a full redesign. So I'll show you some tools now. If anyone wants to put in the chat, if you want to put in your website, I'll do a live demo of how you would evaluate your site speed and your site accessibility, what tools you can use to kind of see that. So if anyone wants to put their website address in, you can do that. Otherwise, I'll kind of grab a random one from an attendee that I already looked up. So speed, what we're going to look at for speed is in my little toolbox here, I have that page speed insights. So page speed insights, this is a tool that Google makes. It's a free Google tool. I've got a volunteer here, emerge-mn.org. So what you do is you put in a website. You do have to do one page at a time. It doesn't scan your entire website, but you put in a URL and you analyze it, and it's going to give you a performance speed score for both mobile and desktop. So it's going to sit here just for a little while and run this tool here. Sometimes it takes, 30 seconds to a minute. Put in the chat if you've ever used this tool before. So this says no data found. This just means that it hasn't already collected publicly, like real data from the public. So if your site is very, very high traffic, like, a big site like CNN.com, that will have public data they've already captured in here, but most of you won't have that. So now this is the performance for mobile, and you can see mobile versus desktop. So here's the mobile performance. So this is not terrible. So the score goes from 0 to 100. 68 is not terrible. We generally say you want to be 70 plus for mobile and you want to be 80 plus for desktop. So what this tool does, it's testing the performance, giving you a score. It's showing you a preview right here of what the mobile view is going to look like. And then it has all these different statistics. So 2.9 seconds, that means that's how long it takes for the screen to kind of show up the majority of the design. 4.5 seconds until the site is interactive. You could say scroll or click on links. So that's what those things mean. And you have very good speed and very good blocking time. This just is like things that are loading, like scripts or fonts or things that block the interaction. So this is pretty good. This is not bad. Here's the little timetable, right? The timetable of things loading. So you can see how the site loads in on a phone. And then here's their recommendation. So serve the images in a different format, reduce unused CSS, reduce initial server response time. So this is related to your website host, meaning that you could potentially optimize your site or potentially get a better website host. This basically means that you've got a bunch of design code in there that isn't being used for the page that's being loaded. And the images means that you could improve these image sizes. So these images are fairly large. They could be probably reduced. So that's just kind of a quick, and then here's other things. So this is a quick little thing. We'll click desktop. So desktop 94, good job. That is well within what you would want. So this website is fairly good performing. You could definitely make some improvements at mobile, but I would not say it's terrible. I wouldn't be, worried. I wouldn't be worried about it. So this again gives you all the same numbers, and you'll notice the numbers are all much better. So what this tool does, it's kind of simulating loading your page on a phone versus a computer. Computers are much more powerful than phones. So generally your performance number on the desktop will be higher. Now, if you see that it's flipped, if you see that, the mobile actually performs better than the desktop, that is really interesting. And I've seen that before. And that's definitely a sign that there's major improvements that could be made, that your mobile is optimized much more and your desktop must either be loading huge images or doing other things that are, hindering the performance. So, so again, you've got this response time. So I'm not sure who you can put in the chat if you want who you host with, but this could probably be reduced with either some hosting tweaks or like tweaks to the actual WordPress settings, So that's how do you evaluate your speed? If someone else wants to volunteer, or I can keep with Emerge MN, we can also look at that accessibility. I was talking about accessibility. So we use this, the Wave website accessibility tool. And if you want to know anything about website accessibility, really, this website is phenomenal. Okay, we had someone who just tested their site too. That's awesome. And of course, feel free if you want, pull up these tools on your own. So 39 of mobile and a 70 of desktop. There's definitely some improvements that could be made there then. And actually, sometimes it's small things. So I wouldn't like freak out if you see a low number. Sometimes it can actually be small fixes. Other times it's not, we have to look, but so yeah, 39 on mobile is a little bit slow. So if you want to know anything about accessibility at all, this is just a phenomenal website, right? This is from WebAIM, which is accessibility in mind is what that stands for. So does anybody else want to check their site for accessibility quick? Or if you want to put one in the chat, I'll wait a little bit if anyone wants to submit a URL. Otherwise, I'll just take a look at Emerge again. Let's see. So this again, you do have to do it sort of one page at a time. It's not going to scan your full site. And I actually don't recommend those tools that scan your full site. They are extremely expensive usually, and they actually still miss a lot of things. So I'm going to run this here on Emerge. Nice. So the pop-up triggered too. So this basically loads your website and looks at the code, looks at a bunch of different things, and gives you sort of a score. So 0 errors. That is great. That's a good thing to see, the 0 errors. When you click on the details, then you get a detailed list of all the errors. I'm probably going to look at another site too, so I can show you what a quote unquote error looks like. So you do have some contrast issues. Okay, so contract issues and a few alerts here and a few other things you could improve. But in general, the major things here, you've got your language defined, stuff like that. You have your navigation defined, all of these different things defined, which is great. Contrast, it's going to throw some contrast errors for sure. Anything over video, really anything over a video or photo is generally, even if it is high contrast, you'll get an error just because this tool can't tell with the moving pictures, right? Sometimes the contrast is probably good enough, sometimes it's not. So in general, this is problematic for people with poor vision. Putting any kind of content over video is problematic. So I would recommend, probably reducing the amount of content that's over this video if this video is really important. If what's in the video is not so important, making it much darker or putting a black box, so sort of a little bit of transparency over the entire piece of content. For sure, this is going to be problematic, these two colors. That's very light. I'll have to test the contrast. Again, you have text over images, kind of a no-no without some type of thing to make sure the contrast is high enough. Same thing there. So it's really just, it looks like contrast issues. So now if you ever want to test, that contrast, then of course you can plug in these two numbers. You can plug in this color. I'll use my color picker tool. You can grab this color right here. So there's the color code for it. You can grab that color code, and that other tool, which I was showing you, is this contrast tool. So the contrast checker, you can put in, your background color was this color here. You can put that in. Boom, you see that color, and then you can change this to white. And so you're seeing, and this is failing. This is failing both AA and AAA contrast. So the contrast is about 2 to 1. You need to be higher than that. It's 4.5 to 1 for generally considering normal text. That's 4.5 to 1 is the target. So definitely these colors are problematic, unfortunately. So it's not super bad. Generally, you have 0 errors. So that's not too bad, but the colors, some of the brand colors, these are going to be problematic. you're definitely going to want to change that. So that's a quick, I'll do one. I'm going to pull up one other site too, just because I want to see if I can get something with an error to show you what some of the common errors might be. Okay, we do have some errors on this site. Okay, so empty headings. So that is in the code somewhere. You've got a heading. So this is another contrast, very low contrast. This means somewhere you've got a heading tag and it has no content. So heading tags are super important for accessibility because that is how these screen readers and alternative tools break up a website. So someone who can't see can scan it, right, and find the content they want on the page. Again, contrast errors. The contrast errors are extremely common. This is, far too light, that blue. So again, actually not a huge amount of errors, so that's good. But you've got some contrast things to look at. So that is kind of speed and accessibility. That's how I would test and evaluate a site. Definitely, if you have questions about that specific part of it, feel free to put stuff in the Q&A. I'll switch this poll too, because I know I have some kind of poll on accessibility coming up at some point. So the last thing to really evaluate your current site is, I would say, look at feedback. So what have people said? What do people like? What do people not like? Ask internal people, but also ask, external people if you can too. Oh, we have a question. Awesome. Thank you. So what does the redundant link error mean? So redundant link means that you have two links and they're very close together and they go to the same place. So a common thing would be, let's say you have a news section. You have a news section and the title of the little article or blog post or whatever is linked. And then at the bottom of the little description, maybe you have a description that says read more and you have that link. Those two go to the same place and they're redundant. They're very close to each other. For humans, just with normal vision, normal hearing, just using a normal computer, that isn't the end of the world, but it is actually problematic for accessibility because a common function that someone who's blind will use on their device is they'll press a button that says, read all the links on the web page. Just give me all the links. So if I hear a link I want to go to, like about us or donate, I can go there, right? So what that system is going to do is read those two links one after another over and over. So if you have a web page, say you have a news page and it lists all these news articles, say it has 20, and you have the picture for the article is linked, the title's linked, and you have a read more. For each article, they all go to the same place. That is going to be incredibly irritating for someone using a screen reader because it's going to go through and read 3 of the same links over and over and over. So that is what redundant link means. Not the largest of the accessibility issues, but definitely can be very frustrating for people using screen readers. So it looks like half of you are planning a full redesigns, and that is actually common. Usually people kind of say, okay, the site's old, let's just redo the whole thing. Some saying are partial, some saying you're adding new sections. So about a third of you said you're really adding new features or content. So another tool you may want to use if you want to collect really good feedback on your current site is this tool called Hotjar, and check it out. Hotjar isn't extremely inexpensive. It's a little bit more expensive than Crazy Egg, but if you've ever been on a website and a thing pops up and it says, was this page useful? Or rate this page, smiley face or sad face, or can you not find what you're looking for? Tell us what you want. All of those sort of polling and surveying things that happen in a site, a lot of times that's powered by Hotjar. So check that out. That is a really great tool. I've used it on many sites. And this is kind of just a little decision grid we have for types of redesigns, how you decide what do you want to do. So, if these things have changed, if you have a new mission or service, if your market positioning is changing, if you have new competitors, or if you've merged with another organization, or if you have totally different goals, do you have a new program you need to fill, or do you have a new capital campaign, or have the goals changed? So it's just a little decision thing we go through, thinking about, well, what kind of redesign do I really need, right? So types of redesigns, just some quick examples, right? Is a full redesign, you're just updating everything. So why would you want to do that? Well, a big change in mission, you merge with another organization, say you have a new logo, new name even, or branding, or let's say a platform update. So that's common. As sort of platforms get old and get out of date, like Drupal recently end of lifed a couple of their versions of Drupal, which is really bad if you're on Drupal, because if you're on that version, because that means there's no more support for it. So if a big security problem happens or there's an exploit, they're not going to help you fix it. So if you're switching platforms or updating, that's really, you almost pretty much need to do a full redesign at that point. Partial redesigns are nice. Say you have a new homepage. Say you had to kind of rush your previous redesign and you have a lot more programs or content or great things you want to feature, refreshing the homepage or refreshing the main navigation to add new sections or making an incremental improvement. That's common with, partial redesigns. Or, expanding the site. Say you had a staged approach. We ran out of budget for our site. We wanted to launch a new area. We had to wait and do it, in 6 months. That's another type of small redesign. Maybe you have a redesign for a specific topic, event, or seasonal thing, or you're adding new resources. So that's something to consider, what type of redesign. So now we're going to talk about your website structure and your platform. The platform, of course, is kind of the content management system. What is it going to be built on? Is it going to be, hosted like Wix or some type of hosted system, which can be nice and easy. They can be very restrictive too, though. Or is it going to be, a system like WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, whatever? I've got a poll here, I think, about website platforms. Yeah, so let me know what system you're kind of looking at. If you know, I would say basically everything we do is pretty much WordPress. That has almost become kind of the de facto standard. But consider all these things when you're thinking about platform. Consider, what does it have to work with? Third-party tools, donation things. Is it going to be easy for my support staff to use? Can I get support for the site? Is this platform still being used? Is it modern? Is it not going to be outdated? So far it looks 100% of you have said you're going to use WordPress. So that's good. I would highly encourage that. It is definitely the platform of choice. So when you've gone past platform, you're thinking about structure. How is it structured, right? When we approach a redesign, we're going to create a sitemap. And a sitemap is a visual map of your site, starting with the homepage, the main navigation, everything kind of underneath it. We usually add a little legend or key because we kind of color code things. This is incredibly important. Never start building a website without a sitemap. This is at the stage where you can figure out, how is the user flow and the content structured? How many pages are going to be under the about section, this section, that section. Changing the design later, if you figure it out, you need more sections, is more difficult. Do the work now to figure out your structure. So this one was made with a kind of an expensive tool called Mind Manager. You don't have to use that. There are other tools. So I'll show you a tool quick. One of my tools in my little tool chest here is this Miro I talked about, which is just it's mostly free. I just have a free account. But this is, sort of making mind maps, brainstorming, flow charts. This is a nice tool if you want to kind of do a sitemap, right? Do a structure. So, it's really easy. You just, generally you'd have your homepage, and then, you may add other pages underneath it, programs, about us, locations. You may want in your main nav, donate now. You may want to add, testimonials or something else, or, our team, and you just kind of fill that out, and then you can add things, underneath it. And you can even collaborate with other people. And so this is a nice free tool, Miro, if you want to use a site, build a sitemap yourself or in partnership with someone. And there's like dozens of these. You don't have to use this one. This is just one that I found is very easy to use, and very easy to use and quick to kind of develop your sitemap, right? I'm going to switch the poll here. Since you're all using WordPress, that's awesome. We can move on to questions about sitemaps. So that is a sitemap tool you can use if you want. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in. This can be a great discussion. If you know of a sitemap tool you've used, feel free to put it in the chat. So it looks like, have you ever built a sitemap? Yes, you guys have it for your current site. No, Do you want it for the redesign? It looks like the vast majority of you say you don't have one now, but you're going to do one for the redesign. So that's very good. Definitely do that. And if you want to get a sitemap from your current site, you can actually do that. It's not super valuable. I would say do a sitemap for your current site if you have a very large sprawling site and you don't know where things are. I would say make one. And if your site, someone put in the chat that WordPress has a sitemap plugin. I'm sure there's many, and actually you can pull a text-based sitemap off of really almost any WordPress site. You know, you can just go into WordPress like this and add /sitemap.xml, and most of the time that is going to pull up a text-based one. So this is a text-based one so this is the Yoast SEO tool is building a text-based sitemap for you of all the pages. It's kind of annoying because it's broken up into different sections. So, you know, like the pages are a separate sitemap from the posts. And this isn't super useful because it's just a list, but you can save this XML file if you want. You can save it and you can actually turn it into an Excel document or something with a tool like XML to CVS converter like this. So it will actually turn this into a CSV file or Excel file, and then you can kind of have a nice spreadsheet of your pages. So that's an option if you want to. And there's probably many good sitemap plugins for WordPress. Don't forget about planning your integrations. When you redesign a site, it says you said most of you are planning a full redesign. So that's a good time to look at your integrations too. Say you use a third-party donation platform. Maybe you want to get rid of it and just do donations on your actual website. And since you're all looking at WordPress, that is incredibly easy. Say you had a calendar or event platform. Maybe you're using Eventbrite, you're using Classy, you're using all these different systems. Really, when you redesign your site, if you want, you can bring that all internally. With plugins like GiveWP, there's lots of great event calendar plugins. You really don't need to have people leave your site if you don't want to for that kind of stuff. Plan your interactivity, like what kind of forum tools you're going to use, how you're going to do pop-ups or other things. If you're going to do those kinds of things, plan that. Make sure that, say you use a third-party pop-up system and you totally redesign your site, make sure those pop-ups match the new design, right? Don't just leave them whatever the old design was. Plan your calls to action, what you want people to do on your site, right? When your website is supposed to fill a role in your organization and do a specific task for you, whether it's attract volunteers or get funds or sell things or donations, whatever. You know, plan all that stuff out. Content planning. We'll talk a little bit about content here now. And I'll switch the poll too. So it looks like the majority of you are going to be building a sitemap for the redesign. So that's good. That's really basically step one. Do not skip that step. Switch the poll here. So we're going to start talking about now the content design more. So content planning, you know, you're probably not going to completely start over from scratch and write every page from scratch. So look at what you have for current content. You know, what can you repurpose, reuse? If you have a blog section that's getting a lot of traffic, you don't want to just dump that. You want to bring that structure over. You know, do you have graphics and photos? Are your team photos outdated? Should you do a new photo shoot? You know, it's kind of awkward, right? When you see the picture of someone on a website and the picture's like 20 years old and you meet them and they look totally different. And plan, you know, any of your premium content. If you have white papers or case studies or stuff you're downloading, you know, keep in mind, sort of inventory that stuff. So you can use a tool like Gather Content. This is just a screen capture of Gather Content. Gather Content is a great tool. There's many other ones. There's many, many other tools. But I would say, since you're all going to go with WordPress, if you want a tool to help manage your content, you know, before the site is launched, right, while you're writing it and developing it, choose a tool that will hook right into WordPress if possible. So you don't have to like copy and paste or rewrite. A lot of the really good content tools, they'll be able to push that stuff right into WordPress. So think about that. If you don't have any tool, you don't want to spend money. Google Drive Google Drive, if you're disciplined about organization, Google Drive is a great tool to help plan your pages. You can see the thumbnails for pictures here. Like this was for a redesign for something called for a nonprofit, which deals with helping people of color and low income people, get into college. It's an awesome organization. And they have lots of icons. They use tons of icons. So we had a folder of icons for the designers to make sure they are using the right one, right? So Google Drive, if you don't want to get a separate tool. So, these are just tips for the content. Of course, reuse high performing content. If your personas have changed, if your goals have changed, realign that content with whatever those new things are. And so here's, it's just something briefly from that toolkit, the toolkit, which will come in the email you can download. This is a worksheet called a page brief, which is very handy. If you have a page brief for every page before you start writing the content, it's going to be a lot easier for the writer to write. It will also be easier if, say, you want to use multiple writers. You have some internal staff. Maybe you're working with an agency. Maybe they're hiring writers. The page brief really says what should be on this page. Who is the audience for the page? What's the messaging? What's the primary message? What's the value this page has to the visitor? And then, what's the action you want someone to take if they're on this page? What is the next thing you want that visitor to do? And SEO stuff, what is the are there legal guides, brand guides for this page? What type of imagery should be on it? Any special considerations? So if you have a page brief for every page, that's a helpful tool. Let me know if you want in the chat if any of you use page briefs. So we're going to get into wireframes now. Another critical planning step. So it said, I did this poll if you've ever wireframed your site. So a few of you, only 17% said you do have wireframes for your current site. Most of you said you had some, but your site maybe has changed. It's not really following the original wireframes. So what a wireframe is, I'll just show you some examples. Wireframes are basically like a skeleton for a page. And they're just sort of no colors, no photography generally, no really design. It's the layout. It's how is our information going to be laid out, on the home page, on each program page or an event page or a blog page or our location. How are things going to be laid out? Generally, there isn't a wireframe for every single page on your new website. There's a wireframe for each basically major template, major different type of layout, right? So we always do a lot of wireframes, usually for sites. This is a homepage one, especially for like how people navigate around, where your button's going to be to get people to the next step through your site. Interactivity, like we even wireframe if like you have a pop-up that's really critical or something, or a search, we'll wireframe that up. And especially interactivity. This was a critical section of this website. This was where most people were going to go and do something on this website. This was the search engine for home ownership workshops. So this was a nonprofit that helps immigrants and low-income people and kind of people take financial training and get the skills and the resources in place to buy their first home. So awesome organization. A lot of interactivity in this section, so we wireframed it very, very accurately, very down to the little button, So I'll switch the poll again here. I'll try to leave some time at the end too for just Q&A on anything. You can ask questions about any of these topics really throughout this whole thing. So test your brand colors. So we're going to get into design, right? Look and feel. And that's really, a lot of it has to do with your brand and your colors. So it looks like about a quarter of you have tested your brand colors for accessibility. Now I just showed in that quick review, right? The accessibility review on that website. It looked like some of those brand colors were fairly light, definitely hard to use for accessible parts, right? So plan your look and feel. The visual look of your website, it does make a difference with how well it's going to help your mission, how well it relates to your key audience and that kind of thing. So brand colors, they're better for accent, actually. And this is what we've kind of found, even just briefly when we looked at that one site. Brand colors generally are not as bold, not as contrasty. So you either need to add some secondary colors or use the brand colors as accents, pick some bolder colors. And like I already showed, test your colors, test your combination of colors to make sure that you're meeting the contrast requirements for accessibility. And there is I showed you that tool already. There's another tool. If for some reason, say you're having a hard time determining new colors, or you just want a little like inspiration, there's another little tool in my tool bag here, which is this color space thing. So you basically plug in a color. You can plug in one of your brand colors or some other color. You're going to plug in a brand color. You can hit generate, and it'll build different palettes just for maybe some inspiration. If you want to figure out what tones of gray go with our brand color, what are opposing colors. And this is just a really cool thing to, if you do need to add some extra colors, you can use this free tool. And there's other ones out there too. This is just the one I like, this color space tool. So and then of course your typography, usually you're going to have official brand fonts, which may or may not be web fonts or usable. Be very conscious about fonts. I would say highly recommend sticking with open source fonts like Google Fonts or any other system with open web free fonts. It's rare, but I have run across a couple clients where they're using licensing fonts and they have to pay every year to use the fonts, or the fonts are just really inaccessible where the letters connect, they're too close, or scripty kind of fonts. That's very difficult for cognitive and people maybe with different vision issues or cognitive issues. They can't read that. So fonts do have a little bit of an impact on accessibility too. And then of course, as you're looking at design, you're going to want to look at your imagery. Whenever possible, original video, original imagery content. And of course, you can mix and match it with stock stuff if you need stock stuff. I believe I actually have a poll. Yeah, I have a poll on original content here for photo and video. So I'll launch that. And then another thing a lot of times people do is people combine all those elements we talked about. They'll take the color, the photography, style stuff, fonts, they'll mix it all together in what we call style tiles. Not everyone's going to do this, but if design's super important, if you're going to put effort into design, creating these style tiles before you go onto the full website design, super helpful. Awesome. We've got a question. How long should an organization plan for a full redesign process? How many months? That is a really good question. Of course, that's hugely variable because your site could be really small or it could be massive and require a change in platform, a lot of different things. I would say the ideal time is really 6 to 10 weeks. 6 to 10 weeks, in my mind, is the ideal time frame you should shoot for. It's very stressful to do something in less than 6 weeks. It's quite stressful, even if you have a lot of resources. And we've done that. We actually redesigned and redeveloped the Minneapolis Parks website, the entire system, which is thousands and thousands of pages. And it was built on a custom content management system, which the company was like getting rid of. So they either had to redo their site or was going to go offline. Now, obviously, a city like Minneapolis, you can't have your parks website go offline. That was a very quick turnaround and extremely stressful. So I would say 6 to 10 weeks is ideal. It's averaging about, I would say it's averaging about 8 weeks, usually. Highly variable though on the size, the type of redesign, and how much of your staff can really help, right? Like I said, approval process. It's funny, but the approval process and finalizing the content, those two things delay sites the most. People can't agree on something and you have a board and the entire board has to approve something. That slows stuff down. And that last 10%, the last 10% of the content always takes more than clients think. We have a pretty good judge of how long it's going to take, but it always takes longer than what clients think the content's going to take. So plan for more time for content to get that in there. So thank you very much for that question. That is a great question. So I did a little poll here about original content. So are you going to leverage original photo and video? 86% of you said yes. So that's awesome. That is awesome. And it's not the end of the world to use a stock photo here and there, right? But like lots of websites use stock photos. You see the same photo everywhere, right? And it's kind of, it can be kind of obvious sometimes. So the last step, really, the last step for your redesign as far as planning the design of what the site's going to be is, of course, a full mock-up, a full graphical mock-up. This is what the new homepage is going to look like. So here is what some mock-ups look like for that Children in Nature Network site. So we did a full mock-up of the homepage. Like wireframes, you're not going to fully mock up every single page. You're going to do the main ones. Maybe the homepage, maybe a blog article page, maybe a donate page. So you do key pages. And then really, once this is done and the mockups are approved, it is really off to the programmers to turn this into a WordPress website. And then, from there, it's putting in the content really. So create, moving, and maybe your content's in Gather Content or Google Docs if you've been building it this whole time. It's really nice to have some content ready for that wireframing stage. I would highly recommend. Sometimes people make a wireframe and they really like it, but then they realize, ooh, the text we need in this space is way too much, right? There's not enough space. So I would say if you're going to say maybe wireframe and detail the homepage or some other pages, it's nice to have that content almost done, right? Really close. So you can put the real content in the wireframe, make sure you have enough room, right? So now it's really just about putting that content in there and continually go back to your strategy. The worst thing is to have a good strategy and a good, page brief and a good SEO brief for each page and then never use it. So make sure you go back to that. Make sure you bake into your content the things like language to reach your goals for your audience, the SEO, accessibility, all that stuff. Another little thing from this toolkit, which you can have for free, it's coming in the email, is an SEO on-page worksheet, right? Just to keep in mind and have a little checklist of all the SEO things you need to keep in mind for your page content. And this is a fairly simple worksheet, but it does a really good job of kind of keeping your mind on the things you want to, you need for your page. That's really all the kind of tips and tricks and tools I have to show you. We're basically at time, but I can stay on a little longer. I really was hoping, you guys would have questions. Do you have questions about any of this stuff? Anything that you're worried about for your redesign project? Feel free to ask it right now and I'll hang on for a little bit longer. Let's see if I have one more poll yet. I might have one more poll. Nope, that was the last poll. Are you leveraging original photo and video content? So do you have examples of an RFP? I will see if I can find one and send that. We don't actually often do RFPs. Actually, a lot of our business comes from organic. People find us and they kind of really like our case studies and examples, and they hire us, and a lot of actually word of mouth. So we don't do a ton of RFPs, but I know for a lot of organizations that's important. I will try to find an example that I think is good and include it in the follow-up email. I don't really have one off the top of my head. We should though. We actually probably should have one for when it comes up, like when you ask. So I'll see if I can track something down. Any other questions? I can stay on for a couple more minutes if you'd like. Of course, my email too will be in the follow-up email, and you can email me a question if you don't want to ask it in front of everyone. Feel free to email me. The follow-up email comes Tuesday. It's going to come Tuesday. It will have links to every tool I covered. It will have a link to rewatch this if you want to. You don't have to register. You can just watch it. It will have the download for this toolkit, which actually has many, many more pages. I think it's 20 pages of stuff. Just sort of a really nice set of templates and guides and checklists you can use for your website redesign. Any other questions at all? And we can look at any websites if you want to look at your website or run a wave on it, or any other questions about any steps in a redesign. Thank you so much again for joining me. I know everyone's getting burnt out on Zoom, right? Zoom stuff and webinars. Thank you. You're very welcome, Amy. Thank you very much for joining us.